Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett, and just when you think the Brandon Aiyuk saga may have hit a hiatus, we may actually have a couple weeks of peace and quiet as we await for NFL training camps to begin in July. Brandon Aiyuk comes out of nowhere, just like he did last week, and shocks Niners Twitter and gets the NFL buzzing once again. Welcome into the show today. Put all your comments in the comment box. I promise I will get to every single one of them. I want to kindly ask you to hit like, share, and subscribe on the show, and let's dive into what Brandon Aiyuk did today, June 24th. About a month away from training camp, he just cannot keep himself out of the news, and this all dates back to the video that came out about a week ago today, maybe. I think it was the day after Father's Day, so 1 week ago from today, Brandon Aiyuk releases the TikTok video of him saying the Niners don't want him. We discussed how that was Brandon Aiyuk trying to create leverage, trying to get leverage back into his favor during contract negotiations. And yet again, he's up to antics to continue to create leverage for himself. So yesterday, about, I want to say, maybe 7:30 at night on the Pacific Coast, Brandon Aiyuk posts a picture on his Instagram story that says he was headed back to the Bay Area. Now, there are many ways you can look at that. During that time, many folks said that, well, he lives in the Bay, he's just heading home, this doesn't mean much. If you're somebody like myself, I put it on X or Twitter, and I said, Brandon Aiyuk is headed back to the Bay Area, where he wasn't for the past couple weeks because he was training outside of California, but he was also heading back to the Bay with his kids. And I'm not an athlete, to be fair, but most athletes do not travel with their children when they're just going to workouts, doing media availability. They usually travel with their kids when they're going either back home, which could have been the case, or when they're trying to make life-changing moves like Brandon Aiyuk is currently doing. So he's traveling with his kid back to the Bay. Everyone's speculating, what does this mean? What does this mean? We found out today what exactly Brandon Aiyuk was doing when he traveled back to the Bay Area yesterday on a private plane. We have now learned that Brandon Aiyuk is meeting or already has met with the San Francisco 49ers front office today alongside his agent. But on top of that, we were also told via Ryan Clark of ESPN that Brandon Aiyuk is quote-unquote disgruntled with the Niners and set up the meeting impromptu, and he's taken negotiations very personal. Clark also stated that when Aiyuk walked into the room to tell Clark and announce he was going to meet with San Francisco today, former ASU teammate and current Commanders quarterback Jayden Daniels was also with him. So a lot of stories right there in itself. He's disgruntled. He's taking things personal. Why is Jayden Daniels there? Then why was the meeting so impromptu? We're going to dive into all of this right now. So again, like I was stating earlier, the video a week ago from today, Niners don't want me. He's FaceTiming Jayden Daniels, his girlfriend, his fiance, his wife, whatever she is or will become to be, is there laughing, they're giggling, they're having a good time. And it seems as if that was the first domino to fall in the Brandon Aiyuk media saga trying to create leverage for himself. Today's the exact same thing. It is him continuing to try to create leverage for himself. A week ago it was the TikTok video. Today it was him telling the media, him telling ESPN's Ryan Clark on NFL Live, him also telling ESPN's number one source getter, number one NFL insider Adam Schefter, that he's disgruntled, that he's trying to get his point across to the masses, to get his voice heard to the NFL world in hopes it can some way turn the tide in his negotiations. And I think when you talk about, negotiations, talk about business negotiations, I'm someone that, I haven't had the opportunity to state my worth, and slide that note card across the table asking for millions and millions of dollars. But I know you never want to show your hand early. You want to feel like you're composed and strong. And also, it pays to find your opposition, if you will, because in this case, negotiations, although have been relatively, in my eyes, beneficial. They've worked together pretty well. We've talked about how Aiyuk's agent has dispelled plenty of rumors out there. They've overall been relatively quiet and pleasant between the two parties, but sometimes it takes catching your person you're negotiating with, the party in which you're negotiating with, catch them on their heels, not paying attention. That is exactly what Brandon Aiyuk did yesterday and today, calling an impromptu meeting with the San Francisco 49ers front office and the brass. Now, we have no idea who was in those rooms. We would like to assume it was John Lynch, Parag Marathe, Brandon Aiyuk, and Brandon Aiyuk's agent. We have no idea if Kyle Shanahan is there. Shanahan has stated multiple times that he leaves all the negotiating to John Lynch and the front office and stays out of it until football becomes a priority when those guys are already signed. Maybe Jed York was there. We also have no idea if he was there. So, you would like to assume this was a, hey, I'm tired of waiting. Let's get this thing done, or at least let's give me an answer of if I'm going to stay here or if I'm going to be playing elsewhere this upcoming NFL season. This is Brandon Aiyuk catching San Francisco's front office on their heels, where many of them, they're on vacation. This is the summer break of the NFL. The draft process is over. All your guys are signed, unless you're Brandon Aiyuk, and you've given your players, your team, about a month off. The NFL says, go on one, go to Cancun, go to Texas if you want to go there, go to Florida, go to Miami, go international. Do whatever you want, right? George Kittle's doing tight end. Kyle Shanahan's not in Levi Stadium. They're all taking their breaks. And what does Aiyuk say? When they're least expecting it, bang. Hey, John, I want a meeting. I'll be there in the Bay tomorrow. I'll see you there. John's like, And Aiyuk's trying to get the front office to panic, trying to put them on their heels and put the ball back in his court, hopefully to forcefully make San Francisco make a move, whether it be re-sign him to a large contract and or potentially trade him elsewhere this upcoming season. I do find it funny that, we have no idea what the insights were for the Deebo Samuel negotiations or the Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Trent Williams, and those things. Obviously, Trent Williams was almost a free agent. Nick Bosa, Fred, and Deebo never actually were. Kittle never actually was. And there really hasn't been too much of those negotiations put out there in the media. We do know some with Deebo in regards to him asking for a trade. I know Deebo Samuel did a video, I think last year in the offseason or 2 off seasons ago, for overtime, detailing what the negotiating period was like for him. He was at, kids camps and taking phone calls with his agent, Tory Dandy. While that doesn't seem to be the case, this actually feels like the first time of the, 5 or 6 players San Francisco's actually given big money to and extended, that the player has kind of taken control of the negotiations himself, which honestly, it's a heck of a move by Brandon Aiyuk. You talk about a team like San Francisco that likes to penny pinch, likes to wait these things out till the very last minute, who doesn't want to pay their guys what they think they're worth, only wants to pay them what the franchise thinks they're worth, which by all means is a ton of money still, and is usually record-breaking money. But Brandon Aiyuk, from what we know as fans, as journalists, as media, this is the first time that Brandon Aiyuk, or any player in which San Francisco has negotiated a big money contract extension with, has taken the negotiations, by the horns, by the reins, and started to call meetings himself. From our knowledge of what just transpired today, or maybe this morning, that this was a random, hey, John, I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be there. Make sure Prague and Kyle and Jed York are all there maybe. This was Brandon Aiyuk, kind of telling the Niners, hey, I mean business, that I want to get this thing done, or I want to be elsewhere in the next few weeks. I want to narrow and detail this thing out because I'm tired of this. Just like you are, right? Niner fans, whether it's X or Instagram, they're all saying that just get a deal done, accept the offer, pay him what he wants, this, that, and the other. But again, this is Brandon Aiyuk trying to take control of the contract negotiations. And look, by all means, good for Brandon Aiyuk. Good for taking control. Good for being a player, although really not in a position of power by any means. And I do think there is a way where, while it's a good thing for Aiyuk, he's being very assertive in this, which also, if you flip it, maybe it's a sign of desperation of, hey, the longer I wait, the longer I let this thing play out, like we've talked about plenty of times, where San Francisco begins the year and Brandon Aiyuk is not there. He's been fined probably $1 million to that point. It's roughly $100,000 for every 3 days. And you have about, I don't know, roughly a month of training camp and preseason to go. So you're going to have 30 days. So you're looking at millions of dollars off of his paycheck, in which he's already on the fifth-year option, as Beto from the Niner Sickness podcast points out, where he says, Aiyuk's on the fifth-year option. I mean, he has no control. And then, of course, Beto laughs. And he also says, Brandon Aiyuk isn't in control. Niners want him to feel that way. Niners always are in control, period. I think there is a way to look at this, and while you can congratulate Aiyuk, you can give him his kudos, his flowers, saying, good job, you are being assertive in this. This is him being desperate. This is him saying, look, the longer I wait, the more money I lose. The longer I wait, there's a chance if I hold out into the season, I don't even get $26 million. I get $24 million. If this team wins without me and Ricky Pearsall continues to play well in my absence and Jawan Jennings steps up, maybe it's Jacob Cowling or Chris Conley or whoever it is, and this team goes 4-0 without me or 3-1 without me, I'll be lucky to get $26 million like I apparently was already offered. So this is a little bit of desperation. Like, it's a good thing for Aiyuk, but I do think there is a way to twist it and say, what is Aiyuk doing? Oh, he's desperate. He's desperate. And I think, when you look at what Niner fans believe or, have taken away from this, the person I always point to is Bobo in our YouTube chat. They say, I'm telling you, Sterling, they're going to deal Aiyuk before the season starts. They're going to give him permission to seek a trade. That makes sense for him and the team. Bobo also says, I hope Aiyuk remains a Niner for life, but business. And I think Bobo hits on a point Niner fans fear, that the Niners haven't learned from their previous negotiations. The Niners haven't taken away the correct things from Nick Bosa's negotiations last year, of him almost missing week number 1. That the longer you let this thing play out, while Aiyuk doesn't have the advantages Nick Bosa did, you do run the risk of your, number 2 receiver, a star you want to re-sign, not being on the field and maybe forcing his way out of San Francisco. But, again, Bobo, we've talked so much, and Bobo has one more comment here. Aiyuk sees receivers around the league getting deals. Then then Christian McCaffrey gets paid big money, and that frustrates him, which I think lends to the comments by Ryan Clark and Adam Schefter saying that Brandon Aiyuk is quote-unquote disgruntled with the organization and is taking negotiations personal. So it's funny to me when I see Adam Schefter say that Brandon Aiyuk is disgruntled, because what does disgruntled mean? It either means you're done with the team, you're aggravated, you're tired, but my question is as to what level. Because if Brandon Aiyuk was so disgruntled with the San Francisco 49ers organization for how they've handled things during negotiations, during the contract talks, why would he then make an impromptu meeting, fly himself from out of state and his kid to Levi Stadium to have a meeting with John Lynch on the fly? He obviously isn't that disgruntled. If he's that pissed off and that angry and that upset and that disgruntled, you know what you do? You have your agent make the phone call. Have the agent talk to him. You do not fly back to California to have these meetings. You don't call impromptu meetings if you're that angry. And so I know that's probably the word the agent used to Adam Schefter, maybe the words that Brandon Aiyuk used to Ryan Clark of ESPN. But the idea that, like, I have been disgruntled at work. I'm sure you've been disgruntled at work. Guess what? You either quit or you come to work or you have a meeting and try to work things out. Well, Brandon Aiyuk, he can't quit. He's under contract with San Francisco, who holds his rights, technically, if you want to get crazy with it, for the next 2 years. He can't just quit the Niners. That's off the table. He's not coming to work, so what is he doing? He's coming to the table trying to work things out. And if you read and listen to everything Ryan Clark said on ESPN today, there was a quote that was put, and I found it on NBCSportsBayArea.com. Shout out Jennifer Lee Chan. She says, or Ryan Clark said this, that Aiyuk said he wants to be in San Francisco first, but is comfortable playing elsewhere if that's something that the San Francisco 49ers are willing to do via trade. Again, I will read you that first line of Ryan Clark speaking on behalf of Brandon Aiyuk. Aiyuk says he wants to be in San Francisco first. Aiyuk is coming to the table trying to negotiate a contract extension. He's not asking for a trade. He doesn't want to be traded. If he wanted to be traded, he would have asked for one pre the April 25th draft. He doesn't want to get traded. He knows that time is long gone. Brandon Aiyuk wants to be a San Francisco 49er. In fact, if you dive more into what Adam Schefter has been saying recently, whether it's on ESPN, on the Pat McAfee Show, NFL Live, and you're listening to what's been transpiring, even go back to the Deebo Samuel media availability during minicamp. They asked Deebo Samuel, hey, Deebo, you've been through these contract negotiations before. Do you have any advice for Brandon Aiyuk? He said yes. The one thing I told him was do not take things personally. It's super hard not to. San Francisco's fickle. They're tough with their money. They're going to use things against you to drive down that price. Do not take things personally. This is a great place to play. It's a good place to win. Do not take what they use against you personally. It doesn't matter if it's Deebo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk, Juwan Jennings, eventually, hopefully, Ricky Pearsall and Brock Purdy and Jacob Cowling and every single other player they're eventually going to have to pay. The name next to the numbers and the stats mean absolutely nothing to the San Francisco 49ers from, like Bobo said, a business side of things. The San Francisco 49ers have openly told Brandon Aiyuk, we want you to be here. They've openly told the NFL, we want to keep Brandon Aiyuk, while the exact same thing has been stated out of Brandon Ayuk's mouth. I want to be a 49er. And if that can't come to pass, then if San Francisco is willing to pursue a trade, I'll accept that. This is all headed towards a contract, extension. I know it's tough when you get caught in between things, and we have dove, whatever the word is, whatever the verbiage is. We have looked into this so many times during the offseason, right? Where we talked about how San Francisco, if Aiyuk plays this year on the 5th-year option, they can always franchise tag him next year, then trade him. They can also franchise tag him again in 2026, like Beto from the Niner Sickness podcast points out. This is all headed towards San Francisco, again, holding all the leverage. This is Brandon Aiyuk coming to the table saying, look, guys, I'm tired of not being in the building. I'm disgruntled because I don't have a contract yet. He's not disgruntled asking for a trade.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
That trade would have been asked for 3 months ago, like Deebo Samuel did. This is like, and this is the big difference. And I've tried to point this thing out to so many people. Like, the Niners and Deebo Samuel's negotiations were 10 times worse than the Brandon Aiyuk ones. Brandon Ayuk's contract negotiations, and I get it, it's like the 6th time this has happened, but have overall been relatively quiet until last week and today. Aiyuk has said nothing publicly. George Kittle said nothing publicly. The issue with the last 2 negotiations, it was Deebo and it was Nick Bosa. Your number 1 receiver, who you could lead to calling him a diva if you want to. He's definitely more open to not playing in San Francisco than Aiyuk is. And then Nick Bosa is the defensive player of the year at the time. Those were tumultuous, are these actually going to get done negotiations. Those were, when the final second ticks off the clock, are they a Niner or are they going to be playing elsewhere, right? Aiyuk, there's never been talks of trades. Adam Schefter stated on ESPN, may have been this week, could have been late last week. He talked about that the San Francisco 49ers openly never called people wanting to trade Brandon Aiyuk. Sure, do they accept calls? Yeah. Why wouldn't you? I'll always go back to this. If the Chicago Bears said, hey, we'll give you the number 9 pick in the draft and you can take Rome Odunze, I guarantee you San Francisco makes that trade. But the Bears weren't doing it. The Jaguars never offered 17 despite what the rumors may have been out there. Aiyuk is worth more than the 17th overall pick. Brandon Aiyuk was... San Francisco never got an offer that tickled their hiney, if you want to say that, right? And San Francisco never called teams saying, well, how about this? Well, the Jaguars, we know you only want to give away Zay Jones and a 3rd-round pick. How about a 1st-round pick and Zay Jones? Those conversations didn't happen. Those negotiations didn't happen. Adam Schefter openly said that nothing ever got close. In fact, this brings us to the next point of the conversation. Why is Jayden Daniels everywhere? He was the one Aiyuk was FaceTiming. He was, apparently, if you believe Ryan Clark's comments, he was the one with Brandon Aiyuk when he told Ryan Clark he was going to have a meeting with San Francisco today, and that he was disgruntled and took things personally during negotiations. Now, it's my understanding that Aiyuk and Jayden Daniels were hanging out with the Pivot Podcast guys, which includes Ryan Clark, but if you dive into their history, we've talked about it plenty of times here. Jayden Daniels and Brandon Aiyuk were teammates at ASU. They have continued to stay friends throughout their entire college NFL career so far. Now, this is where things get tricky, because now Jayden Daniels is the quarterback for the Washington Commanders. Okay, who's at the helm of the Washington Commanders? Adam Peters. There's connections. There's been previous trades, right? Players have gone from place to place and swapped places plenty of times with the Commanders, including Kyle Shanahan and his regime, including, Adam Peters and many others. Logan Thomas is now in San Francisco. Jordan Reed played in San Francisco. Trent Williams trade being a big one, right? So there is reason to believe that if there is a team out there that would want a Brandon Aiyuk type player, it would be the Washington Commanders. They just watched Curtis Samuel go to the Bills. They have Terry McLaurin. They have Jahan Dotson. They have a young quarterback there. Why not get that young quarterback his guy? Do what the Bengals did for Joe Burrow and get him Jamar Chase. Like, the Bengals needed offensive linemen during that draft. They said, no, we're going to get our young quarterback, his teammate at the time at LSU, and we're going to get him a star receiver. I could see the Washington Commanders at least having some sort of thought of like, you know what? Aiyuk's younger than Terry McLaurin. Him and Daniels are close friends. They have chemistry. Let's make the young quarterback comfortable. Let's trade away some picks. Adam Peters is like, I know Kyle, I know John, I know how they operate. See if we can kind of get things done with those guys. But it's not as if Washington didn't already call San Francisco, as Adam Schefter also reported that the Niners had talks with the Commanders before the draft in regards to trading Brandon Aiyuk. The talks went nowhere because San Francisco wanted to keep him bad enough. And the offer in which the Commanders gave San Francisco, it wasn't good enough. It wasn't enough for them to let Brandon Aiyuk go. Okay, so the Commanders have already tried and they struck out before the draft. Where does that put us now? Is a trade even possible? Sure. There are plenty of teams that would take on a newly extended Brandon Aiyuk contract. There are plenty of teams out there that would want to have Aiyuk at least on a fifth-year option, then extend him. There are plenty of teams that actually need a receiver still. The Steelers come to mind. The Patriots come to mind. The Buffalo Bills come to mind. The LA Chargers with Harbaugh and Navarro Bowman and Greg Roman and Herbert, they come to mind. Imagine Ladd McConkey and Brandon Aiyuk on the same team. Good luck, right? Then the Washington Commanders. But again, even if Brandon Aiyuk walked into, and let's take everything that we talked about today. He's disgruntled, he took things personally, and let's just use that and say Brandon Aiyuk is so pissed off, and he's angry, and he's done. I don't want to be a 49er anymore. Okay, what are the next steps with that? You ask for a trade, Aiyuk, cool. You know what happens? John Lynch, Jed York, Prog Morante laugh him right in the face. Oh, you want to get traded? Huh? Guess who owns your contract rights? We do. If you wanted the trade, you should have asked for it 3 months ago. We have all the leverage in this. No one's going to give us now what we wanted then for your contract and for your player. It's not going to happen. It doesn't matter if Aiyuk even asks for a trade. Cool. Here's $100,000 in fines. Are you coming to camp or not? We're not trading you. That time is long gone. And if you want to force the issue, like we've talked about plenty of times on the podcast, they have his rights for at least the next 2 or 3 years. There is literally nothing Brandon Aiyuk can do to get out of San Francisco unless he pulls a Terrell Owens and starts working out in the driveway with the shirt off and the media around him. And guess what? I don't think anybody cares enough to go to Brandon Aiyuk's house where he works out with the shirt off, doing barbell chest press and dumbbell chest press in his driveway. No one cares. If Brandon Aiyuk is a 49er this year, great. But like the fan base, they're kind of done. Oh yeah, if Aiyuk stays, it's great, but if not, cool. Like, I think it was Benjamin Solak put on Twitter today. What does a Brandon Aiyuk offense or a Brandon Aiyuk-less offense look like for San Francisco? Relatively the same. Now, again, no one's saying that you wouldn't lose a little bit. Of course you would. Aiyuk's a great player that deserves to get paid. And I think that how far they are from negotiations, I don't think it's that big of a chasm to make up, right? You know, Klee Young says, give the man $28 million. I'm right there with you. If he wants 30, which maybe he does, which apparently, again, according to Adam Schefter, that the reason, and this is so funny to me, he says San Francisco and Brandon Aiyuk were relatively close to nearing a deal. They were really close to nearing a deal. And once the receiver market exploded, right, Jalen Waddle's deal, Amon-Ra St. Brown's deal, and Jefferson's deal, that may have changed Brandon Aiyuk's mindset of, man, well, that guy's getting a 34 and this guy's getting 30. He's getting how much guaranteed? Well, I want that money. Forget 24, forget 26 mil a year, forget, 28. I want $30 million a year. So it's not like, according to Adam Schefter, they weren't already close on putting pen to paper. It's just as soon as the other guys started getting signed, Aiyuk said, well, pause. Wait a minute. The game has changed. John Lynch, I'm sorry. But it's not like they weren't, it's not like that, things are horrible and the relationship is broken. No, it's not. It's not. John Lynch, the Niners, and the entire front office have gone through way worse negotiations with a player like Deebo Samuel. Brandon Aiyuk is doing nothing compared to what Deebo Samuel did or Nick Bosa did. Like Nick Bosa, and I always talk about this, walked into Niners OTAs or maybe it was minicamp, day one, walked in, talked to his teammates for maybe an hour or so, came to the podium, answered like 10 questions, and one of them was, hey, Nick, when are you going to get a contract? Or what do you think you're worth? And he goes, I think I'm worth what I'll get paid, and that's a lot. And he walked out. Like, that was a public display of, if you don't give me what I want, I'm not playing, which almost transpired. Aiyuk is nowhere near that. Nowhere near saying, if you don't give me $30 million, I'm not playing. I'm not playing at all. And look, Bobo brings up a great point here, that Aiyuk should just hold in. He ain't got to work out, just show up. It's like going to high school gym. He ain't got to do anything, just show up. Change your clothes, be in street clothes, be on the sideline, don't get fined, and guess what? Don't also practice. That's a great idea, Bobo, honestly. You don't have to do anything, Aiyuk. Just show up. He ain't got to be in team meetings. He's got to be there in street clothes on the sideline during practice. You can stay in the weight room. You can be with Cam Latu, who does nothing during practice because he can't practice yet, right? It's like where these negotiations are going as of today, which again, if you're joining the show 30 minutes in, Brandon Aiyuk called an impromptu meeting with the Niners, flew back out of state to California to have the meeting with, which apparently was John Lynch and company, who knows who else was in that room, with his agent, not to ask for a trade. Not to ask for a trade. It was to hash this thing out because, again, the quote via Ryan Clark out of the mouth of Brandon Aiyuk was, Aiyuk says he wants to be in San Francisco first, but is comfortable playing elsewhere if that's something the San Francisco 49ers are willing to do via trade. And even that, dissect that. Aiyuk wants to be a Niner. Cool. Great. He'll get traded if that's something San Francisco is willing to do. If San Francisco's not willing to trade you, then you gotta be a Niner. Like the Aiyuk negotiations for the last couple of weeks, despite there being so much media around them, and today he's disgruntled, this, that, and the other, I think we're in a relatively good place. Unless in the next, couple of days he asks for a trade, in which at that point I say, cool, great. San Francisco would still say no, but overall, they're in a pretty good place. But let's play devil's advocate here for a second, because many people still believe he might get traded. Bobo, you're one of them, that Aiyuk might get traded. And so let's play the game. What if Brandon Aiyuk was to get traded? What would that look like for the Niners? Well, I think the asking price would probably have to be lower than it was pre-draft, right? It's going to have to, I think, in my opinion, be an early second-round pick, which is an assumption because the games haven't been played yet, but you're dealing with bad teams like the Patriots, like the Commanders. If you get lucky, maybe the Bills aren't as good as you want them to be, or the Steelers, have an off year or down year and have their first under 500 season under Mike Tomlin, or the rebuilding Chargers. I think those teams are kind of the top five of where he might end up, unless the Carolina Panthers come out of nowhere, right? But I think you are not getting a first round pick at this point for Brandon Aiyuk. You're just not. Now, if you wait until deadline day, maybe a team would do that. Don't forget the Cowboys traded the first round pick for Amari Cooper a handful of years back. Tyreek Hill was traded for a first-round pick during the offseason. Devontae Adams was traded for, I think, a handful of first-round picks to the Raiders. Like, there is a way to get a first-round pick out of teams. It's just not at this time. San Francisco, in regards to trade talks, had leverage pre-draft, but even then, it wasn't that much knowing how deep this draft class's receivers were. I mean, there's talks of, the guys drafted after the first round being better than some of the guys in the first round. There's talks of this receiver of this past draft class being, 8, 12 guys deep where they all could produce in year one if they're allowed to play a lot. I mean, I know we want to talk about Brandon Aiyuk, but Ricky Pearsall, I don't think he'll play a crazy amount, but the assumption was he'll have a role in the offense. Well, if Aiyuk isn't out there, well, I wouldn't expect Pearsall to just supplant Aiyuk automatically. They're very similar, and Pearsall can actually impact games. He's a good player. Now, while he isn't Brandon Aiyuk, it's not like San Francisco just becomes a crapshoot and sucks because Aiyuk doesn't want to play. But, I will say this. It is in the San Francisco's best interest to re-sign Brandon Aiyuk. For how long? That's not my place to choose. Whether it's 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, don't matter to me. It is in the San Francisco 49ers' best interest to re-sign Brandon Aiyuk. One, because him and Brock Purdy have great chemistry. We talked about, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and the Bengals making it a point to go and get Chase in the draft to help Joe Burrow make him comfortable as a young quarterback. We've talked about how the Commanders may want to get Aiyuk to make Jayden Daniels comfortable as a young quarterback. The San Francisco 49ers may want to keep Brandon Aiyuk to make Brock Purdy comfortable as a young quarterback. Now, I know Purdy isn't a rookie, but he's going into year 3. Or, I guess year 4, technically, right? Like, he's going into his 3rd year as a full-time starter. Right? No, he's going into his 2nd year. Oh, my God. That's how young he is, right? Like, Purdy's a baby compared to the vets in the NFL, despite being better than a lot of them. But all that to say, it would be in the best interest of San Francisco, one, to keep Aiyuk for Brock Purdy, to keep him comfortable, knowing Deebo Samuel's going to be likely gone in a year or 2 time, depending on how that contract works out. Mike Silver put out a pretty good article about a month ago detailing that, Brandon Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel, if Aiyuk stays and plays on the 5th-year option and Deebo Samuel having, one kind of guaranteed year left in his contract where they can actually move him next year and save money, they could be battling it out, to see who stays in San Francisco or gets a bigger money deal, whether next year or in 2 years' time, which that comes with the pros and cons. Sometimes you get the best out of somebody. Many believe that, with the idea of the Niners openly talking about trading Deebo Samuel and then having conversations with his agent saying, hey, we might trade you during the offseason, allowing him to say, kind of grow comfortable with that and bring that to his attention, that they may push Deebo to having a career year again, kind of like 2021 Deebo was. And the same thing, I think, is the hope for San Francisco of the harder ball they play, the more frustrated Aiyuk gets, the more motivated that Aiyuk and Deebo become. Now, can that backfire? Yeah, big time. But the idea that San Francisco is just going to cave because Aiyuk called a meeting and he's upset and he's frustrated, no. The Niners are one of the most level-headed organizations at the top in the NFL. They are not going to blink. They're not going to cave. Now, they might give you an inch or so, but they ain't giving you the whole foot. Ain't no way. That's not how they do things. If you want 28, they'll offer you 26. If you want 30, they'll offer you 26. Then incrementally work their way up to 27. Work their way up to 28. They're not going to give you what you want because you asked for it. Unless you are Trent Williams or Nick Bosa. And even then, both those guys, Nick Bosa, that was a long and hard contract negotiation because Nick Bosa was coming off a career year. Trent Williams was darn near a Kansas City Chief until San Francisco said, hey, we cannot let this happen, and called that dude at like midnight, 1 a.m. before free agency clicked and got that deal done, and he posted it on social media. It's not like San Francisco hasn't taken things to the brink with players better than Brandon Aiyuk. Like, they have stared into the abyss of losing Trent Williams of all people. You think they're going to do that with Brandon Aiyuk? Now, what makes me feel better about this, what makes me comfortable in continuing to say that I do believe the San Francisco 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk are going to get a deal done, is because, one, they actually almost already had one done. So if Aiyuk just asked for a couple $1 million more, all San Francisco has to do is wait this thing out a little bit longer than Aiyuk's asking price come down or stays where it is or drops from 30 to 29, and they can figure things out in the middle. But you can also look at this in regards to Aiyuk asking for a meeting. You can look at this from, and I have no idea if this is the case, it's pure speculation. San Francisco playing hardball. Like, I'm married now. I have a wife. We dated for 6 years, almost 6.5 years before we got married. And you and I both know, whether you're a husband or a wife or you're dating somebody, whatever you are, you know that sometimes you argue. Sometimes you fight. And sometimes you get the silent treatment. Sometimes they don't want to talk to you. And sometimes you're in the doghouse. And even though maybe you don't feel like you got to say you're sorry and you don't feel like you got to come to the table, you're the first one to blink and say, look, hon, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Just to make things easier for yourself. And that doesn't mean you're being disingenuous. It just means that sometimes, for the sake of your relationship, you got to say you're sorry. You got to come to the table first, even though maybe you aren't the one that actually did anything wrong. Brandon Aiyuk, in this case, is in a relationship with the San Francisco 49ers. And I don't think Aiyuk did anything wrong. But I think because San Francisco was giving him the silent treatment and playing hardball and kind of, giving him the, if you want 30, you better think long and hard before you come back and talk to us. Well, Aiyuk seemingly thought long and hard about what he wanted to do and came back and talked to San Francisco today. So it's not as if the deal, is far away. It's not as if it's also set in stone. There's a whole month to go before training camp starts, but if you're looking at this in a negative lens, I wouldn't. This is a positive thing, because I think it was a week ago, 2 weeks ago, pre-Father's Day, ESPN's Jeremy Fowler openly said contract negotiations were dead. There was no positivity in regards to getting a deal. Now, all of a sudden, Aiyuk's calling meetings and they're having conversations again. They're talking again. They're texting, they're emailing, they're on Kick, they're on Snapchat. Like, John and Brandon Aiyuk are openly having conversations. And sometimes the best and worst things for NFL players is having agents do all the work. Because an agent is out for two things. One, the player, sure, but also for himself, right? That agent wants to get the higher money so he can also get paid. And sometimes what happens is that when an agent and a GM or whoever else is in the front office are having these negotiations back and forth, and the player only hears what the GM and the team's front office is saying through his agent, it comes across a lot worse. You ever played telephone? Where what they're saying could be the exact, could be correct, could be the exact same verbiage in lines, but it's how they say it which changes things. When you're out in public and you say, hi, hello, sup, like, people can take all those things differently. You wake up in the morning, eye contact with your wife can make her say, what's wrong with him? And you're like, nothing. I'm fine. I'm just sitting here on the couch eating some breakfast. What do you mean what's wrong? I'm good. So things can get lost in translation simply because you're not face-to-face with that person. You ever read a text message and you're putting it in how you're taking it, whereas the person's like, well, I didn't mean it like that. No. That's why it's important for Brandon Aiyuk to actually call this meeting to hopefully, if it was the case, and I believe it was so, be face-to-face with the San Francisco front office. Talk to them. Because when you openly talk to somebody, not over text, not through somebody else, you know what happens? All the miscommunication goes out the door. You can be honest, you can be upfront, you can be personal, and you can just be real. And sometimes being real hurts. I can tell you plenty of times in my life, I was in love with a girl in high school. Love with her. Now, I was a lot bigger now than I once was. I kind of had a neck beard growing out, and I was not as handsome as I once was. And even to this day, I ain't as handsome as I want to be or think I am. But I was in love with her. But me and her had to have a heart-to-heart because she just wasn't into me. And that stung, and it hurt. And I was like, man. She's like, we can still be friends. And I was like, oh, you're killing me. 4 years later, we're in college together. Now no one cares. Right? Now we're graduated college. She's married. I'm married. We have different lives. All that to say that sometimes the person-to-person, the face-to-face conversations hurt, and then you get over them. You move on. Yeah, like if Aiyuk actually wants $30 million, which we have no idea if he does, that is the assumption based on Justin Jefferson's deal and the Amon-Ra St. Brown deal, because Aiyuk's receiver coach in the offseason, TJ Houshmandzadeh, had said, if you give Aiyuk the Amon-Ra St. Brown deal, he'll say yes, and we can call this thing a day, put pen to paper, and just kind of wrap this thing up lock, stock, and barrel. So that's the assumption. And if they come to him and say, look, Brandon, we love you. We want you to be here. We want to pair you with Brock Purdy for the next 5 to 7 years. We want you and him to be quarterback one and receiver number one. We have a plan in place. We have Pearsall. We have Cowan. We have Juwan Jennings here. Let's go win a Super Bowl, and you need to be on this team for that to happen. We believe in you. Since the day we drafted you, where Kyle Shanahan was fist pumping in the draft war room during COVID, you were an instant starter. You were in the doghouse, dug your way out. You are exactly who we want a San Francisco 49er receiver to be. But at $30 million, Brandon, you and I both know we can't do that. We can do 26. How does that sound? I don't like it. I need 30. Okay, Brandon, look. We'll increase the guarantees. We'll give you more money up front. Give you a bigger signing bonus. We'll make up for the money you won't get annually. We'll give it to you up front. Well, the numbers won't look great in regards to your AAV, but overall, we'll give you exactly what you want. No, I want 30. Okay, Brandon, look, you're not Justin Jefferson. You're not Amon-Ra St. Brown. You're a fourth option on this team. We need you, but we need you to look long and hard in the mirror. We get it. You want to get a deal done. We want to get a deal done with you. We're actively trying to negotiate with you. We're playing hardball. You're playing hardball. You want what you want. We have a line we will not cross. But we have other parameters in place that we can get you that money in a different way. We can give you incentives. We can give you a bonus. We can give you guarantees. We can match the Amon-Ra St. Brown guarantee today. We just can't give you the $30 million per year. Now, look, Brandon, we're open to renegotiating your contract every single year. Fred Warner, done it plenty of times. Mooney Ward, done it a handful of times. We've renegotiated George Kittle's contract about 17 times in the last 3 years. We can come back to the table in 1 year's time. Let's just put pen to paper now and get you back in the building, because the longer you wait, the longer your body takes to get ready, and we need you come week one. And Aiyuk sits back and goes, okay, I'll sign for 27. How's that sound? Boom, pen to paper, deal done. He gets the guarantees he wants. Now, I'm obviously fantasizing what a miracle negotiation looks like, but what I'm saying is that when you get face-to-face, things happen. The ball starts rolling. The paper starts flying, the pen starts getting put to paper, and things start getting done. Whereas if Aiyuk wants to stay in Arizona or other states and work out, great, cool. Nothing is going to get done until he comes back to the Bay. And that's what today was. I'm not saying a deal gets done tomorrow or a deal gets done in a week, whatever. I'm not saying, I have no idea when they get a deal done. I have an idea. It'll probably be during training camp. But it looks like, from all intents and purposes, because they almost already got a deal done earlier this year, that we are not far off from Brandon Aiyuk getting a contract extension. If they almost got it done early in the offseason, who's to say, because Ayuk's back in the Bay Area now, and they are face-to-face having these meetings, that they will not get one done in 1 week's time? That they don't lock Aiyuk into Levi Stadium and say, look, you're not leaving DeAndre Jordan style until you sign a contract. Like, things are in a good place. An overall really good place for Aiyuk in San Francisco. Yes, they hold his rights, and things can get nasty and dirty and muddy and gross, and they can turn horrible. Horrible. But they're not there right now. They're in a really good place to a point of Aiyuk is willing to come back to the table personally. Not with the agent or via the agent. It's him, his agent, San Francisco's front office talking about what they want, a deal they want to get done. And the more you communicate, the better. Whether it's a relationship with your wife or husband, they always say the worst thing for a relationship is when you stop talking. That's what happens in the NFL. What happens is, player comes to the table. I want a new contract. Then he puts the parameters on the table. I want $30 million per year. Then he pieces out for the next 3 months during the offseason, lets the agent do his bidding, and then the team and the players stop talking. Things get personal because things get lost in translation. Whereas if you just come to the table, we can get this thing done in a month. If you wouldn't leave to go work out in Arizona and talk to the Pivot Podcast boys, of all people, Ryan Clark and Jayden Daniels out there in Washington, I get your friends, but come back to the Bay. Let's talk. Let's hash this thing out. I can say this with conviction behind me. There are a lot of relationships in my life that I lost because I stopped talking. I'm a guy. I shut down. I get quiet. I just bury it under the skin, bury it down deep, and I just move on. The beautiful thing with my wife now, we have made it a point that if you're having a bad day, talk about it. If you got something in your brain, you want it good, bad, ugly, talk about it. Get it out. Don't let it fester. Never go to sleep angry, right? If you're upset and you're pissed off, talk about it. That's what Aiyuk's doing. He's disgruntled. He wants to talk. Deebo Samuel didn't do that. He let Tory Dandy do his bidding until it was time to sign that deal. Then he put his red vest on and his white shirt on and said, I'm a Niner. When in reality, things have not been great. Not been great with Deebo. Aiyuk is coming to the table now, willing to conversate, willing to talk to John and the rest of the front office and say, look, let's get this thing done. Let's get this thing done. Because, look, teams like Pittsburgh and the Patriots and the Bills and the Chargers and the Commanders, even if Aiyuk says, get me out of here, even if things get ugly and disgusting and bad, you think Pittsburgh, like, the worst thing for Aiyuk, honestly, is for him to publicly ask for a trade. Because if Aiyuk publicly asks for a trade, then guess what? All 31 other teams know, well, San Francisco doesn't have much leverage. And that lessens the idea or the hope Aiyuk does get traded. The best thing for Aiyuk would be to keep things close to your vest, come to the table like he did today, don't let anything get out, and just do what you got to do. Talk, communicate, again, teams are not going to come calling for Brandon Aiyuk if a trade request gets out. That happened with Deebo. The Godfather offer was like 2 fourth-round draft picks from the Jets because teams knew, well, he asked for a trade. SF doesn't want to trade him. He's disgruntled. He didn't want to play for you, and San Francisco said, yeah, we'll call his bluff. We'll see what happens come August when he signs a new deal. The same thing is happening with Brandon Aiyuk. Now, he hasn't asked for a trade yet. He hasn't asked for a trade. He shouldn't ask for a trade. He's in the best place for him to flourish as a player. Like he said, he wants to be here. But like Laurie Matthews says, Brandon Aiyuk is a bit dramatic. He needs to come to the table with the right intentions. And I think he is. In the next couple days, if we hear Brandon Aiyuk has asked for a trade, you can almost guarantee you he's going to be on this team. Because if he asks for a trade, his trade value plummets. It means San Francisco has less incentive to trade him. If you're the Niners, and let's just be blunt here, if you're the Niners and the trade offers you had for Aiyuk was maybe a 3rd-round pick and a 5th-round pick before the draft, let's just say hypothetically, it was a 3rd and a 5th-round pick, and that wasn't good enough for you, and he hadn't even asked for a trade then, if he asked for a trade now, you're nowhere near the draft. That pick that's in the 3rd round could be a late 3rd rounder instead of an early 3rd rounder. That 5th round pick could be darn near a 6th round pick, not an early 5th round pick. And Aiyuk is like, I want out of here. And you're like, we have no incentive to trade you. We'll let you hold out. You can rack up all the fines you want. We'll either trade you during the deadline. We'll let Pearsall run wild on teams if he isn't in the doghouse. And if it all turns to you know what, we'll trade you in a year in the offseason after we franchise tag you. Or because if you sit out, you don't accrue a season and you got to do it all over again. So it would benefit both sides, including Brandon Aiyuk, to play the hush-hush game. You know, the let's zip our lips, be quiet, keep the cookies in the cookie jar, and let's get a contract done. Today's news wasn't bad. Hearing disgruntled has negative tones behind it. Hearing I have taken things personal during contract negotiations has negative connotations behind it. But in reality, it's a great thing. Because it means, and because Aiyuk came to the table, that's why it's a good thing. Had he not come to the table and they weren't talking, off-season noise is always happens. But because Aiyuk called John and said, I want a meeting today, I'll be there tonight, and I'll see you tomorrow, and they came to the table, it's a positive thing. Niner fans should be glad. Because whether it's a trade or an extension, a resolution is coming relatively soon. And that could be in next month, that could be in August, but I think something may happen sooner than that. Now, I'm of the understanding and of the liking that during training camp, blood starts flowing, guys get out there, things get hot, they want to, he starts missing the players and missing the organization, the facilities. He sees his teammates out there, he sees his friends playing football, he's like, I want to be out there. Then things get done. This is a great day. Good. I'm happy you're angry, Brandon Aiyuk. I'm happy you're disgruntled. I'm happy you've taken things personal. I'm happy that you come to the table, because then things can actually finally get done and we can put this thing behind us. Because let's be honest here, this team is coming off a Super Bowl overtime loss against the same team that did it to them in 2019, 2020. You cannot have this distraction from one of your star players. You need him on the field day one. And I get it. Get your money, BA. You get your money. Go get paid as much as you can. Get your bag. But we need you on the field come day one. Super Bowl aspirations begin training camp, OTAs, mini camp, and you've already missed 2 of those. We need you here for training camp and preseason and week 1. Because we're trying to climb that mountain. Just like Bosa and Kittle and Debo and Fred and Trent and at the time Jimmy Garoppolo, we need you here. Because we have something bigger and better than yourself to get accomplished. Winning a Super Bowl. And we need you here to get that done. So put your personal issues aside. Put your disgruntledness aside. Get to that table. Hash this thing out and get this negotiations over with. I want to see a picture on social media. Brandon Aiyuk in a suit, smiling with this brand new contract with the feathered pen that everyone signs their deals with. And I want to see Brandon Aiyuk signs an extension with the San Francisco 49ers. And I wholeheartedly believe we are on the cusp of that happening relatively soon. I don't know when exactly, but the fact that Aiyuk is willing to come to that table is all good signs and points to things getting done. Thank you all so much for watching the video. If you like what you saw, please subscribe. Please hit like on the video. If you're listening on the audio platforms, leave a review, give us 5 stars, tell us how you feel about Brandon Aiyuk down in the comments. Do you think a deal gets done? Do you think he gets traded? How much do you think he should get, will get? When do you think this deal actually gets done? Is him being disgruntled and is having personal issues, is it a bad thing? Or because he came to the table, is that a good thing? And Bobo, I see in the comments saying, I would have handled things worse than Brandon Aiyuk. I'd be crying like a little, you know what, begging for money. I cry over $20. Bobo, I'm there with you. And thank you for the easiest segue of my life. If you're like Bobo and you're crying over $20, which I agree with you, how about I save you $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek.com using our promo code 49ersaccess. 49 ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com. It'll help save you, Bobo, and the rest of you out there $20 off your first purchase to hopefully go see Brandon Aiyuk play in a Niners jersey this year and the foreseen future. You can also follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the X or Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. Be sure to check out our quarterback tier ranking that came out last week. A lot of you agreed, a lot of you disagreed. You might want to see where I put Brock Purdy. Might make Niner fans pretty happy, but I can tell you now, Detroit Lions fans are very, very, very angry with where I put Jared Goff. You'll have to check it out for yourself. But thank you all so much. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave that review. Have a wonderful Monday and rest of the week. And until next time, as always, stay faithful.